Starter. Remove the starter. 1. Remove the hexagon nut. 2. Hold the starter motor with both hands and remove it along the rotation axis of starter gear. Install the starter. 1. Pay attention to the protection of wiring terminal and wiring harness during maintenance. It is forbidden to collide and pull the terminals and harnesses. During installation, check if the insulation coverings, sleeves, pads, etc. are intact, and replace the damaged ones. The starter 30 terminal and the housing must not be shorted. 2. Apply the lithium grease for vehicles to the starter gear. 3. Install the stud. 4. Install the starter motor and tighten the nut. Oil dipstick components. Remove the oil dipstick components. 1. Remove the oil dipstick bracket bolt and remove the bolt bracket. 2. Hold the dipstick tube vertical with one hand and pull out the dipstick component with the other hand. Install the oil dipstick components. 1. Check whether the appearance is in good condition. 2. Install the dipstick. Check whether the dipstick can be pulled out and inserted easily. Fuel filter. Remove the fuel filter. 1. Remove the low-pressure fuel pipe connected with a fine filter. 2. Remove the hexagon bolt with serrated flange for fixing the filter seat. 3. Remove the hexagon flange bolt for fixing the filter bracket. Install the fuel filter. 1. Check the fuel filter seat and bracket for cracks and deformation. 2. Install the filter block bracket and tighten the bolts. 3. Check the fuel filter block and filter element for bumps and cracks. 4. Install the fuel filter assembly. Fan bracket, alternator bracket. Remove the fan bracket and generator support. 1. Remove the fan bracket fixing bolts and remove the fan bracket. 2. Remove the alternator bracket tightening bolt and take off the alternator bracket. Install the fan bracket and alternator bracket. 1. Check whether the appearance is intact. Rotate the fan bracket belt pulley. 2. Install the fan bracket on the engine body with 4 hexagon flange bolts and tighten the bolts. 3. Assemble the alternator bracket to the engine block and then tighten them with the hexagon flange bolts. Oil gas separator assembly. Remove the oil gas separator assembly. 1. Preparations before disassembling. Fix the engine reliably and remove those components blocking the oil gas separator. 2. Disassemble the clamp of the oil gas separator gas inlet pipe and take off the gas inlet pipe. 3. Remove the clamps of the oil gas separator gas outlet pipe and take off gas outlet pipe. 4. Remove the clamps of the oil return pipe of the oil gas pre-separator and the oil return pipe of the oil gas separator and take down the oil return pipe. 5. Remove the clamp of the oil gas pre-separator and take down the oil gas pre-separator. 6. Remove the oil gas separator fixing bolt and then take down the oil gas separator. 7. Remove the oil gas separator bracket fixing bolt and then take down the oil gas separator bracket. Install the oil gas separator assembly. 1. Check these components for damage, cracks, etc. and these pipes for baking and other failures, and replace the corresponding part if any. 2. Use 2 hexagon flange bolts and 2 supporting blocks to install the oil gas separator assembly on the engine body through the support. 3. Install the pre-separator oil return pipe on the engine body using 2 hexagon flange bolts, with a gasket between them. 4. Install the oil gas pre-separator on the oil gas separator through the connecting hose. 5. Fix the 2 ends of the connecting rubber pipes of the 2 oil circuits to the oil return pipe of the oil gas pre-separator and the oil return pipe of the pre-separator and the oil return pipe of the oil gas separator and the oil return pipe. 6. Fix the air outlet pipe on the air outlet pipe of the oil gas separator with a clamp. 7. Fix the 2 ends of the connecting hose of the gas circuit to the pipe joint of the water pump and the oil gas pre-separator respectively with a clamp. Note: water pump components. Remove the water pump components. 1. Remove the 5 bolts for connecting the water pump and the engine block. 2. Remove the water pump assembly. 3. Remove the O-ring. Install the water pump components. 1. Check the water pipe joint, plug and temperature sensor for leakage, and if any, replace them with new ones. 2. Check the water pump assembly for such damage as cracking and inflexible rotation, and if any, replace it with a new one. 3. Before the refitting, check if the water pump pulley rotates flexibly. 4. Grind the junction surface of the front end of cylinder block and the rear cover of water pump, then wipe it. Apply 518 flange sealant on the joint surface. 5. Place the O-ring in the O-ring groove of the rear cover of water pump. 6. Clean the body joint surface. Install the water pump assembly and fasten it with bolts. Crankshaft pulley assembly. Remove the crankshaft pulley assembly. 1. Screw off the hexagon flange bolts to remove the crankshaft pulley and the torsional vibration damper from the front end of the crankshaft. 2. Screw off the vibration damper bolts to remove the vibration damper from the crankshaft pulley. Install the crankshaft pulley assembly. 1. Check the vibration damper for bump, and check if the cooling fins are detached or deformed. 2. Check the pulley for damage, and check for crushing damage at bolt place. 3. Check the vibration damper bolts and hexagon flange bolts for damage. 4. Apply a small amount of lubricating oil to the heads of the front torsional vibration damper bolts. 5. Assemble the torsional vibration damper. Refit the torsional vibration damper onto the crankshaft pulley with 6M10 x 1.5 torsional vibration damper bolts by pre-tightening them diagonally, and then tightening them to 60 to 70 Nm. 6. Install the crankshaft pulley. Refit the crankshaft pulley onto the crankshaft with 6M12 x 1.5 hexagon flange bolts by pre-tightening them diagonally, and then tightening them to 45 Nm and rotating them by 135 plus or minus 5 degree. Cylinder head cover assembly. Remove the cylinder head cover assembly. 1. Loosen the bolts of the cylinder head and supporting screw and turn. 2. Remove the cylinder head cover and its gaskets vertically and upward. Install the cylinder head cover assembly. 1. Check the cylinder head cover body for cracks, severe wear and other damages. If there are cracks, replace the cylinder head cover with a new one. Note: 2. The cylinder head cover gasket is only allowed to be used once, and it shall be replaced with a new one during repair. Before installing the cylinder head cover gasket, check that it has no manufacturing and usage defects or damage. 3. Clean the sealing surface between the cylinder head and the cylinder head cover, and assemble the cylinder head gasket, cylinder head cover, locating sleeve, etc. in turn correctly. 4. Install and tighten the bolts of the cylinder head cover. Rocker arm and rocker arm shaft. Remove the rocker arm and rocker arm shaft. 1. Loosen the hexagon head screw, then gently remove the EVB bracket, rocker arm shaft assembly, intake and exhaust rocker arms and rocker arm bracket. 2. Make marks properly to avoid confusing the rocker arms of each cylinder. Install the rocker arm and rocker arm shaft. 1. Clean the rocker arm, observe the appearance of the rocker arm and the valve adjusting screw for cracks and other defects. 2. Check the rocker arm bore for wear and scratches and measure its diameter. 3. Check the ball pin and rocker arm for wear. 4. Check the oil passages of rocker arm shaft and rocker arm for blockage. 5. Check the wear of EVB adjusting screw, and check the EVB bracket for cracks or wear. Check the valve bridge for cracks or wear. 6. Install the parallel pin into the pinhole on the bottom surface of rocker arm shaft assembly, and tighten it to the limit, ensuring that it is free of cracks. 7. Assemble the rocker arm bracket and rocker arm shaft together and ensure they fit closely. Apply a small amount of lubricating oil to the rocker arm shaft, then install the rocker arm assembly to ensure it rotates flexibly, and insert 2 hexagon socket head cap bolts into the rocker arm shaft bracket. 8. Press the dowel pin into the hole of cylinder head, install the EVB bracket into the locating pin, and refit the hold-down bolt to locate the bottom surface of the EVB bracket in place. 9. After assembling the valve push rod, see its assembling steps, fit the valve bridge assembly and exhaust valve bridge assembly on the intake and exhaust valves respectively. 10. Install and pre-tighten the rocker arm components, align the pinhole on the underside of rocker arm bracket with the dowel pin on the top surface of cylinder head and locate the pinhole in position completely. Install the rocker arm ball pin into the circular hole of valve push rod. Note: 11. Tighten the bolt of rocker arm bracket. 12. Tighten the EVB bracket bolts and tighten them to a torque of 20 plus or minus 3 Nm. Push rod. Remove the push rod. After disassembling the rocker arm, take out the push rods directly. Install the push rod. 1. Check if the oil passages of the push rod are unblocked. 2. Check the push rod for bending, and check the wear of the external surface. Check the push rod ball joint and concave end for wear. 3. After assembling the cylinder head, clean the push rod with compressed air, and then check if the oil hole is unblocked. 4. Apply clean lubricating oil to the push rod, and ensure that the ball joint and concave end are sufficiently lubricated. Refit the push rod with its spherical surface downward. Cylinder head assembly. Remove the cylinder head assembly. 1. Remove the fuel injector. 2. Loosen and remove the eye bolts at both ends of engine. 3. Remove the cylinder head auxiliary bolt and nut, and then remove the clamping block. Note: the clamping block has 2 structures, i.e. the cylindrical one installed on an auxiliary bolt between 2 cylinder heads, and the other installed on 2 auxiliary bolts on a cylinder head at both ends of engine for installing the lifting ring plate. 4. Loosen the cylinder head main bolt, remove it and put it in place. 5. Remove the cylinder head. 6. Remove the cylinder head gasket. 7. If the cylinder head auxiliary bolts need to be replaced or inspected. 8. Remove the rocker arm bracket, intake and exhaust valves and other valve trains. 9. To check or replace the valve stem seal, remove the seal with a special tool. Install the cylinder head assembly. 1. Check the cylinder bore for any foreign matters. 2. Check the valve spring and valve deflection. 3. Refit the cylinder head auxiliary bolt. 2. Clean the screw and end of the cylinder head auxiliary bolt. 3. Clean the threaded hole on the cylinder block to ensure no residual oil film on the surface, and apply anaerobic thread locker 277 onto it. The application range is required to be at least 5 mm in depth and quarter to half circumference in the circumferential direction. 4. Assemble the cylinder head gasket. 2. Wipe up the inner wall of the cylinder liner and apply the clean lubricating oil onto it, wipe the top surface of the engine block, and place the cylinder head gasket with corresponding pinholes aligned. 3. Check if holes on the cylinder head gasket are aligned with those on the cylinder block and if the cylinder head gasket is assembled correctly. 5. Refit the valve stem seal. Refit the valve stem seal onto the valve guide. 6. Assemble the cylinder head. 1. Before refitting the cylinder head, check that the valve spring, collet and other valve train parts are installed in place. 2. Carefully clean the cylinder head to ensure it is free from dust and then clean its bottom surface. 3. Check that there is no foreign matter in the air and water passages of cylinder head. Check for foreign matter in the cylinder and if the cylinder head gasket and the bottom surface of the cylinder head are clean. 4. Before the bolts of the cylinder head are tightened, position the cylinder head by way of pin surface. 5. Refit the cylinder head. 7. Refit the clamp. 1. Clean the clamp. Two. After applying clean lubricating oil to the bearing surface of clamps and the lifting ring, refit them on the cylinder head in turn. The applied oil shall be of a proper amount to prevent it from flowing into the gaps between cylinder heads. 3. The clamp shall be so refitted that the groove has the same direction with the gap between cylinder heads. 4. Fit the cylinder head auxiliary nut onto the cylinder head auxiliary bolt with hands. 8. Assemble the cylinder head main bolts and cylinder head nuts. 1. Align the cylinder head in sequence. Apply a proper amount of clean lubricating oil on the main bolt thread and pressure bearing surface of the cylinder head, the nut thread and pressure bearing surface of the cylinder head, and then install them onto the cylinder head, the auxiliary bolt of the cylinder head and the clamping block respectively. After that, insert the main bolts and allow them to reach the bottom. 2. Tighten the main bolts of cylinder head numbered 1538 in sequence, and tighten the cylinder head nuts numbered 1 to 14 in sequence. The cylinder head main bolt, cylinder head auxiliary bolt and cylinder head nut can be used for a maximum of 3 times. 3. Valve. Remove the valve. 1. Use the valve spring compressor or valve overhead clamp or other tools to press the valve spring to remove the valve collet, the valve spring upper seat and the valve spring. 2. Take the valve out of the valve seat. 3. Remove the valve stem seal. Point 1. Install the valve. 1. Check the valve stem and valve stem end face for wear. Check the valve cone for wear or damage. Check the valve cone and arc surface for carbon deposit and sinter. Check the upper end face of valve bridge for wear and check the part that is in contact with valve for wear. Check the valve retainer end face for carbon deposit and sintering. If the valve is worn or has serious sintering due to carbon deposit or other defects, replace it with a new one. 2. Install the intake valve spring bottom retainer and then assemble the valve stem seal. 3. Apply molybdenum disulfide grease to intake/exhaust valve stem evenly, and then install the intake/exhaust valve to cylinder head, ensuring that the intake/exhaust valve can slide in the guide smoothly. 4. Tighten 3 dowel pins at the top surface of each cylinder head to the limit. Note. 5. Install the valve spring. 6. Refit the valve spring upper seat. Press the valve spring and refit the valve collet. 7. Use a rubber hammer to tap the intake and exhaust valves to locate the valve collet in position after installing the collet. If the valve collet or valve spring top retainer is not located in position, find out the causes and eliminate them. Oil pan assembly. Remove the oil pan assembly. 1. Drain the oil before removing the oil pan. Place the oil container under the oil pan drain plug and loosen the drain plug with a screw wrench to drain the oil. 2. Remove the bolts from the junction surface of the oil pan and engine block with a wrench. 3. Separate the oil pan and check it for flatness and damage. Install the oil pan assembly. 1. Check the gasket at the drain plug for damage. 2. Check the sealing ring between the oil pan and the engine block for damage. 3. Check the pressed surfaces of bolts and holding block for crushing and damage. 4. Before assembly, check the interior of oil pan for foreign matters. 5. Insert the rubber sealing ring in the oil pan assembly. 1. Make sure the sealing ring is flat without distortion. 2. Make sure the seal joint is located at the straight edge of the oil pan, not at the arc transition. 3. Apply silica gel at the triangular area between the front end cap, engine block and oil pan, and that between the flywheel housing, engine block and oil pan. 6. Pass the hexagon flange bolts, M8, 14 PCS, through the oil pan holding block, and loosely refit the oil pan assembly onto the cylinder block. Tightening torque of oil pan bolts, 22 to 29 Newton-meter. 7. Tighten the fastening bolts of oil pan diagonally. 8. Flywheel assembly. Remove the flywheel. Disassemble the flywheel bolts, remove the flywheel assembly. Unscrew the hexagon head bolts and studs, and remove the flywheel gear. Install the flywheel assembly. 1. Check the flywheel bolt for any thread damage and other failure modes. 2. Fix the flywheel gear and flywheel with bolts. 3. Tighten the parallel pin at the rear end of crankshaft, and make sure to tighten it to the limit. 4. Insert the flywheel guide rod into the threaded hole of crankshaft, refit the components of flywheel, and pre-tighten the flywheel bolts diagonally. 5. Apply lubricating oil to the threads and pressure-bearing surface of the flywheel bolts. 6. Flywheel bolt M14 x 1.5, 9 PCS, tightening torque. Tightening by hands. After application of lubricating oil on the threads and pressure-bearing surface of flywheel bolts, refit the bolts in the threaded hole, and tighten them diagonally to 105 plus 20 Newton-meter, then rotate them by 180 degree plus or minus 5. Tightening with a tightening machine. Tighten the flywheel bolts to 105 plus or minus 5 Newton-meter first, and then rotate them by 180 plus or minus 5 degree, the torque controlled within 294.05 Newton-meter. Flywheel housing assembly. Remove the flywheel housing. 1. Unscrew the fastening bolts of flywheel housing access panel and remove the access panel. 2. Remove the studs from the external edge of the flywheel housing. 3. Unscrew the fastening bolts of flywheel housing diagonally. 4. Remove the flywheel housing. Install the flywheel assembly. 1. Check if the parts are complete as per the parts list, and check the condition of connecting plate, flywheel housing, and engine body. 2. Pre-apply sealant on the bolts of flywheel housing. 3. To check if the junction surfaces of pre-assembled flywheel housing connecting plate with engine block and flywheel housing are clean without burrs, and remove the oil. Afterwards, apply sealant. Note, the glue line shall be uniform and continuous. 4. After the installation of the flywheel housing connecting plate. 5. Refit a parallel pin at the pre-assembled upper rear of engine block, position it together with a lower parallel pin, hoist and assemble the flywheel housing in place, refit the bolts, and tighten the fastening bolts of flywheel housing diagonally with a tightening torque of 97 Newton-meter. 6. Refit the studs on the external edge of the flywheel housing. Gear train assembly. Remove the gear transmission assembly. 1. Remove the hexagon head bolt of the intermediate gear, tighten the bolt into the shaft at the center of the gear, then pull out the shaft, pay attention to preventing the intermediate gear from falling off, and remove the intermediate gear and idler baffle. 2. Remove the camshaft timing gear by removing the hexagon flange bolt first and taking off the camshaft timing gear. 3. Remove the crankshaft timing gear and remove the locating pin. 4. Remove the parallel pin and connecting plate. Install the gear transmission assembly. 1. Check whether the mounting bolt threads are in good condition. 2. Check the gears for tooth flank peeling off or tooth fracture, the bolt pressure surface for crushing damage and the threaded hole or through hole for deformation. 3. Check whether there are abnormal wear between the intermediate gear shaft and the intermediate gear bushing. Check whether any oil hole is blocked by foreign matters. 4. Grind the rear end face of the cylinder block and wipe it clean after oil removal. 5. Tighten the parallel pin at the rear end face of crankshaft, then install the flywheel housing connecting plate and tighten 4 fastening bolts. 6. Apply 5900 silica gel on the joint interface between the body and the connecting plate, and the stranded wire should be continuous and uniform. 7. Apply glue line in the middle of the sealing belt with a diameter of about 3 mm. Apply adhesive horizontally on the joint surface of the engine body and the crankcase. 8. The assembly shall be carried out in time after the application of adhesive, and the interval shall not be more than 5 minutes. 9. After the bolt is coated with oil, apply a small amount of 242 to the part 1 to 2 threads from the head of the screw-in end. The tightening torque is 80 plus or minus 5 Newton-meter. After the bolt is tightened properly and the torque is remeasured, apply the paint seal. 10. Insert the locating pin into the camshaft, turn the camshaft to the appropriate position. Apply a small amount of 242 to the part 1 to 2 threads from the head of the screw-in end after the bolt is coated with oil. Fix the timing gear on the camshaft with bolts. Tighten them properly, remeasure the torque, and then apply paint seal to the bolts. The bolts can be used twice. 11. The counter bore on the connecting plate must be aligned with the marked, large chamfer, gear on the camshaft gear. 12. The tightening process of camshaft gear bolts is as follows. Tighten the bolts with a torque of 8 Newton-meter in the first time. Then rotate the bolts by 120 plus or minus 5 degree in the second time. 13. Drive the cylindrical pin into the connecting plate. 14. With the thrust plate oil groove facing the outside of the engine body, apply lubricating oil to the idler pulley baffle gear friction surface. 15. Install the intermediate gear shaft onto the cylinder block through the thrust plate, intermediate gear assembly, idler pulley baffle and connecting plate in turn. After applying oil to the bolts, apply a small amount of glue 242 to the part 1 to 2 threads from the head of the screw and end. And then loosely install 3 hexagon head bolts. 16. After assembling the intermediate gear assembly, the mark at the slot hole in the intermediate gear must be consistent with the mark on the camshaft gear. In such a case, the counter bore on the connecting plate of the flywheel housing must be aligned with the mark tooth on the camshaft gear. 17. Tighten the 3 fastening bolts on the intermediate gear to a tightening torque of 105 plus or minus 5 Newton-meter. 18. Check whether the intermediate gear rotates freely in both vertical and horizontal directions, tighten it properly and remeasure the torque before applying paint seal. 19. Rotate the intermediate gear assembly so that the mark tooth on the intermediate gear are located between the 2 mark teeth on the crankshaft gear, and finally install the crankshaft gear into the rear end of the crankshaft. 20. Apply 510 sealant onto the joint surface of the crankshaft gear and the crankshaft tail end. The crankshaft gear pin hole shall be aligned with the crankshaft tail end with a locating pin. 21. Check whether the marks are aligned properly. Oil pump, front end cover and oil seal. Remove the oil pump and front end cover. 1. Screw off the fastening bolts of the front end cover, remove the front end cover. 2. Remove the mounting bolts of the oil pump. 3. Remove the oil pump and O-ring. Install the oil pump, front end cover and oil seal. 1. Check the oil pump for crack. 3. Grind the joint surface between the cylinder block and the front end cover, remove oil after wiping, and evenly apply sealant. 4. Install 2 cylindrical pins on the front end face of the crankcase, install the assembled oil pump components on the crankcase, and tighten the hexagon head bolts. 5. Install 2 cylindrical pins on the front end face of the crankcase and drive them to the bottom, install the front end cover and tighten the fastening bolts. 6. Press in the oil seal with the oil seal pressing tooling. Suction strainer assembly. Remove the strainer assembly. 1. Loosen the suction strainer bolts. 2. Remove the suction strainer and gasket from the oil pump. Install the strainer assembly. 4. Apply sealant to the threaded part of the fastening bolt of the strainer. Screw in and tighten the bolt with a washer between them, and the tightening torque is 50 Newton-meter. Piston and connecting rod assembly. Remove the piston and connecting rod assembly. Place the engine at an angle, turn the engine so that the piston is at the BDC, and remove the connecting rod bolts and connecting rod caps. Then turn the engine to the TDC and knock out the piston with a wooden hammer. Be careful to prevent the cylinder block from being caught by the connecting rod big end. Place the bearing bushes and connecting rod caps in the original order. 2. Use the circlip pliers to remove the circlip at both sides of piston carefully. Push out piston pin, and remove the connecting rod body. Number the connecting rod bodies respectively, and place them in order. 3. Use piston ring pliers to remove the first compression ring, second compression ring and oil control ring, and mark them separately. 4. Apply radial and tangential force to connecting rod bearing to disengage the bearing from assembling position, and then remove the bearing. Number the bearing with cylinder number respectively, and place them in order. Install the piston and connecting rod assembly. 1. Check the piston, whether the top has any bump, whether the piston ring groove is worn. 2. Check the piston pin and connecting rod bearing shell for any bruise. 3. Check the surface and inner cavity of piston ring, piston pin for burrs, oil stains and damage. Check the throat of combustion chamber and piston pin seat for cracks and replace when necessary. 4. Check the outer side and the upper and lower end faces of piston ring for abnormal wear. 5. The big and small ends of connecting rod shall be free of burrs and bumping damage. And check that there is no crack, deformation and discoloration around the oil hole in small end bearing bush. 6. If the connecting rod body is scratched or damaged, replace the connecting rod. Check the side of connecting rod for abnormal wear, and check the bending of connecting rod body. 7. Check the connecting rod bushing alloy layer for abnormal wear, peeling. 8. The cylinder number on the connecting rod body shall be the same with that on connecting rod cap. The weight grouping marks of connecting rods of one engine shall be the same. 9. The connecting rod bolt can be used for 1 times at most. The length of bolts shall not exceed 75.3 mm. 10. Check the appearance of connecting rod bearing to see if there are any nicks or burrs on the surface of the bearing. 11. Before installing the connecting rod bearing, clean the bottom hole in bearing. Do not apply lubricating oil to the bearing hole in connecting rod and the back of bearing. 13. Check the wear of connecting rod bearing, and check the alloy layer for discoloration, peeling, deformation and other defects. 14. Use the circlip pliers to install a circlip into the piston pin circlip groove, and rotate the circlip to ensure proper fitting. 15. Insert the connecting rod small end into piston cavity, and align the connecting rod small end with piston pin hole, then fit the piston pin and piston pin circlip at the other side. The retainer opening shall be located at an offset angle of 30 degrees from the piston centerline, and the two retainers shall be staggered by 60-degree clean, and apply lubricating oil to connecting rod small end hole and the piston pin before assembling. The factory marking on connecting rod and the orientation mark of piston shall be on the same side, and the connecting rods and pistons of one engine shall be in the same mass group respectively. 16. Apply radial and tangential forces to connecting rod bearing. Fit the bearing into the assembling place. Keep the bearing from the edge of cracking surface of connecting rod during assembling. Ensure that the locating lip of connecting rod bearing is exactly aligned with the grooves of connecting rod big end and connecting rod cap. Remember to apply lubricating oil to the inner surface of bearing after assembling. 17. Hang the assembled piston connecting rods on the tray according to the cylinder number sequence, and use the piston ring installation pliers to install the coil spring oil ring, twisted cone ring and trapezoidal drum ring into the piston ring groove in turn. Ensure that the piston rings are assembled in the ring groove in parallel without distortion. The top face of the piston ring shall be upward, and the ring shall rotate flexibly in the ring groove. 18. Adjust the opening direction of piston rings. The opening of the first ring should be offset from the center line of piston pin by 30 degrees. The openings of the second ring and the first ring shall be staggered by 120 degrees. The opening of the oil control ring shall be staggered by 120 degrees from the opening of the first ring and the second ring respectively, and locate on the vertical bisector of the piston pin center line. 19. Wipe the cylinder inner wall, crank arm and piston connecting rod component, and apply clean lubricating oil onto the kinematic pair. 20. Turn the crankshaft to locate the pistons of cylinders number 1 and number 6 near the BDC, and gently place the piston and connecting rod assembly in the cylinder liner when the orientation mark of the piston faces to the engine front end. Hold the piston ring compressor against the cylinder liner. Push the piston into cylinder liner via compressor. Then pull down the connecting rod and install it to the crankshaft journal. Connecting rod bolt, pre-tighten it to 35 Nm and then rotate it by 120 degree. After tightening the connecting rod bolts, check the connecting rod bearing clearance, 0.050-0.125. Note, the piston number shall be consistent with the cylinder number. The connecting rod cover shall match. Thermostat assembly. Remove the thermostat assembly. 1. Unscrew the flange bolt, and then remove the thermostat cover. 2. Remove the thermostat and O-ring. Install the thermostat assembly. 1. Check the thermostat for cracking, port tightness or other damage, and if any, replace it. 2. Check the rubber ring for any damage. 3. Check the thermostat cover for any damages. 4. Place the thermostat in the water pump. 5. Install 2 O-rings and the thermostat cover, and then tighten the bolt. Crankshaft assembly. Remove the crankshaft assembly. 1. Remove the crankshaft pulley components, front end cover components, piston, and connect. Turn the engine block upside down. Remove the auxiliary bolts or screws of the crankcase. Remove the locating pins. Remove the main bearing bolts. Remove the crankcase and the lower bearing shells of the main bearing, and place them in a proper order. 2. Remove the front and rear thrust plates and oil seals. Hoist the crankshaft assembly with the traveling crane. Place the crankshaft on the bracket. If the crankshaft is to be conditioned for a long time, it shall be placed vertically. Remove the main bearing upper shell and place them in sequence. 3. Place all the disassembled parts as required. Install crankshaft assembly. 1. Check the main journal, connecting rod journal and fillet of the crankshaft for any burrs, bumps, and bruises. 2. Check and clean the oil passages for cracks and other damages. 3. Check the wear of main journal and connecting rod journal, and check for wear, metal peeling and crack. 4. Check the wear of oil seal. 5. Check the main bearing bolt for thread damage. The main bearing bolts can be used for a maximum of 3 times. They have been used once during machining. 6. Check whether the front and rear faces of the crankshaft are worn, and check the bolt hole on the front and rear end faces of crankshaft for cracks or thread damage. 7. No burr, warping, scrap iron, and etc. are allowed in the oil channels of the crankshaft. 8. Check the thrust plate and main bearing shell for any burr, bump, greasy dirt, and etc. 9. Lift the crankshaft to the bracket, and be careful to avoid bumping. Use compressed air to blow the oil passage cavity to ensure that the inner cavity of the oil channel is clean and smooth. 10. Clean the main bearing upper bush and the bottom hole of engine block. Install the main bearing upper bush into the bottom hole. Check the bearing shell for bumps before pressing in. The bearing shells are not allowed to be reused after repair. After the bearing shell is pressed in, the oil hole shall be aligned with the oil hole of the body. Wipe off any foreign matters removed by the shell opening. 11. Apply clean lubricating oil to the inner surface of upper bush. 12. Lift up the crankshaft part, use a towel to clean its main journal and connecting rod journal, and then gently lower the crankshaft into the engine block. Prevent bumping during hoisting. Apply clean lubricating oil to each main journal after seating. 13. Fit the upper thrust plate into the thrust groove of engine body and crankshaft. The oil groove of the upper thrust plate shall be oriented outward, toward the crankshaft. 14. Clean the lower half of main bearing bush and crankcase. Fit the lower bearing bush into crankcase, then install the lower thrust plate. The oil groove of the lower thrust plate shall face outward, towards the crankshaft. Before installation, carefully check the bearing shell and lower thrust plate for bumps. Apply special lithium grease for automobiles to the inner side of the lower thrust plate. Wipe off the foreign matters removed by the shell opening. 15. Apply sealant on the joint surface of crankcase and engine body evenly. The sealant shall be applied continuously and evenly. 16. Refit the crankcase onto the engine block. 17. Knock the locating pin on the machine body till it reaches the bottom. 18. Refit the main bearing bolt. 1. Before refitting the main bearing bolt, carefully check the junction surface of main bearing bolt and crankcase for foreign matters to avoid scratching the main bearing cap, and manually check the chamfer of bolt pressure bearing surface for burrs. If any, replace the bolt. 2. Apply clean lubricating oil to the pressure bearing surface and threads of the main bearing bolt. 19. Tighten the main bearing bolts. 1. Tighten the main bearing bolts M18, 14 PCS, by numerical sequence shown in the figure, and apply lubricating oil to threads and pressure bearing surface of bolts before refitting them. Pre-tighten the bolts first, and then tighten them by 4 steps. In the first step, pre-tighten them to 80 Nm. In the second step, pre-tighten them to 140 Nm. In the third step, rotate them by 90 degrees in sequence. In the fourth step, rotate them by 60 degrees further in sequence. 2. Check that the crankshaft rotates flexibly without any seizure. 20. Install auxiliary bolts and screws of crankcase. 21. Check the axial clearance of crankshaft. The axial clearance of the crankshaft is 0.052 to 0.255 mm. Piston nozzle. Remove the piston nozzle. 1. Remove the hollow bolt. 2. Remove the nozzle assembly. Install the piston cooling nozzle. 1. Check the nozzle for clogging, and replace it with a new one when necessary. 2. Check the nozzle for any bump. A nozzle with any bump shall not be used. 3. Check whether the inner cavity of the cooling nozzle of the piston assembly is smooth, and whether there are burrs, warping, scrap iron and etc. 4. Check the dowel pin for damage, and replace it if necessary. 5. Align the dowel pin on the nozzle assembly with the pinhole on the cylinder block, fit into the nozzle. 6. Refit the hollow bolt by the tightening torque of 20-30 Nm. Camshaft assembly. Remove the camshaft assembly. 1. Remove the camshaft thrust plate hexagon head bolt. 2. Remove the thrust plate. 3. Remove the camshaft. Install the camshaft assembly. 1. Check the contact surface between the cam and the tappet for wear, and check the main journal for seizure or wear. Check the timing gear hexagon head fastening bolt for bending deformation. The camshaft timing gear for teeth collision or the teeth surface for serious wear. 2. Clean the camshaft hole with towel, check it for bump, and apply a proper amount of lubricating oil to the inner circumference of camshaft bush with the oil reservoir. If any bump is found at the camshaft hole, it shall not be repaired for use. 3. Install the camshaft. 4. Install the camshaft thrust plate, apply clean lubricating oil to both sides of the camshaft thrust plate, rotate the camshaft to ensure it rotates freely. Apply 242 sealant to threads of thrust plate bolt, and tighten the bolt with the torque of 35 plus or minus 3 Nm. Tappet. Remove the tappet. Take out the tappet from the lower part of the engine block after removing the camshaft from the engine block. Install the tappet. 1. Check the appearance of tappet for any bumps, burrs, greasy dirt, and etc. Check the tappet for any defects, if any, replace it. Before refitting the tappet, make sure to clean it with compressed air, and then check if the oil hole is unblocked. 2. Apply clean lubricating oil to the outer circumference and bottom surface of valve tappet evenly. 3. Install the tappet from the bottom of engine block to the tappet hole. The tappet and tappet hole shall be free of bump during the installation. Engine block. Remove the engine block group. Remove the cylinder liner. Install the engine block group. 1. Check and clean the engine body. (8) Assembly of cylinder liner. Carefully check the cylinder liner before assembly. No crack is allowed. Clean the cylinder liner. Before assembly, the cylinder liner outer wall shall be evenly coated with fine molybdenum powder. After installation, check the cylinder liner projection, 0.050.1 mm. Fuel injector and high pressure connector assembly. Remove the fuel injector. 1. Remove the hexagon bolts for fixing the fuel injector clamping block with open-end wrench or socket. 2. Use an open-ended wrench or a socket to remove the high-pressure connector binding nut and remove the high-pressure connector. 3. Remove the fuel injector clamping block. 4. Remove the fuel injector assembly from the cylinder head. Note: install the fuel injector and high-pressure connector assembly. 1. Check the injector bushing for any foreign matters. Check the rubber ring on the fuel injector for any damage. Check the high-pressure connector rubber ring. Check the fuel injector nozzle head at the protruding height for carbon deposit and clean it when necessary. Note: 2. Apply lubricating oil to the fuel injector O-ring, the high-pressure connector thread, and the contact surface between nut and connector. 3. Put the fuel injector into the cylinder head bushing, insert the fuel injector clamping block and bolts, and tighten the fuel injector clamping bolts to a torque of 3 Nm. Or, loosen the fuel injector clamping bolt to ensure its axial force on the fuel injector is 0. 5. Install the high-pressure connector and pressing cap. 6. Tighten the high-pressure connector with the torque of 15 Nm 20 Nm. 7. Tighten the fuel injector clamping bolt with the torque of 8 Nm and then rotate by at 90 degree. 8. Tighten the high-pressure connector with the torque of 50 to 55 Nm. Note: